again, friends and people. I hope this finds you well, as usual. Apologies for taking another year, but it had to be done for some reason. Let's just get right into it. Undiscovered Country, little piece of my mind, part 3. Now, I had this presentation tentatively titled The Money Fucks and the Military. I did mean to change this at some point, but it's still there. So, what can you do? Brief review since it's been a year since I tried to explain fiat currency to you people. It's been 2 years since I kind of introduced my motivations and my basic broad strokes of my worldview. Essentially, I'm a crazy conspiracy guy. Now, that's not really a term I use personally to describe myself, but that's, what society deems necessary. Um, Now, some people do deserve that moniker. Some people I would consider to be above it, but I digress. Fiat currency, basic idea, the private banks can invent money and then loan it to you, where you have to work for 40 years to pay them back, plus interest. That's actually how a lot of the money supply is created, is by the interest on the money that they just create. Inherently unbalanced. I continued with some, again, basics of the international banking structure and how there are these multinational, international, private entities. I focused on the Bank of International Settlements because of its especially interesting relationship with the additionally interesting country of Switzerland and its legal relationship with other countries, and how the BIS enjoys these immunities granted to them by the gods of fucking law, or whoever makes that shit up. So they can just kind of go into your sovereign country and break your laws, and then whoops, you can't do anything because they're a neutral territory, and you can't do anything about them breaking your laws. Interesting. And reviewing the basic, my working worldview. Criminals run things. They are in various positions of influence and power, where they're using their power for their own ends. Not to help us, like most people seem to think. And again, this is a working worldview because I'm constantly open to changing my mind, to adjusting my view based on new information. Now, I've come to these conclusions because I think that there is more than enough information to surmise these crazy ass conclusions are actually true. So, my opening point for episode 3: the federal government's financial management practices are illegal, they're unconstitutional, and they are insane. Now, whether you believe the government is full of people trying to help you as best they can, Or you think, maybe some of them are, out for their own personal gain, but they're held in check by the majority of good people. Or maybe you think that, yeah, they are pretty much a cesspool of criminality and psychopathy. Either way, it's plain to see that our government has overstepped its role. It has morphed into something that is not good for the future of our society, whatever you believe about the government. There are certain facts that show the people that comprise the government are acting in illegal ways, ways that threaten geopolitical and economic safety, societal stability, and the governing dynamic of freedom. Something that does tend to get lost in the mix these days. But we'll get into that in much more detail at a later time. But now we come to Catherine Austin Fitts, the queen of the conspiracy theorist, as I call her. If you are interested in steel manning your argument against the conspiracy crowd, you have to go through her. Her bona fides are as legit as they come. She was former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Bush Sr., former managing partner at the Wall Street investment bank Dillon Read and Company. She was instrumental in advancing financial reform, which they did actually try to do back then. She worked to create legislative law that actually mandated that every government agency and department submit audited financial reports on a yearly basis. Now, this is where our story comes in, because as soon as these entities were forced to actually produce public audited financial statements, they started coming up with some interesting reports. Now, these reports were full of large sums of what are called undocumented adjustments. Now, what are undocumented adjustments? Okay, well, when you're balancing a checkbook, the basic idea is that you need to know how much money is coming in to you, and you need to know how much money is going out. You need to make sure that the money going out is not larger than the money coming in. Pretty basic stuff. According to the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, they define unsupported journal voucher adjustments, which is another phrasing of this idea, as summary level accounting adjustments made when balances between systems cannot be reconciled. Often these journal vouchers are unsupported, meaning that they lack supporting documentation to justify the adjustment, or are not tied to a specific accounting transaction. So there will be times when they, like the DoD or the Army, a subcomponent of the DoD, will have on their books a debit for $700 billion from the Treasury. And it's not backed up by any documentation or any receipts. And it's an interesting figure when the total allotted budget for that year is much smaller than this one adjustment. So these are figures that are added in on either side, on the side either coming in or going out, where we're not too sure what it means. where these funds are coming from, where these funds are actually going, because they're not being tracked properly. Now, while many of these adjustments are valid, having too many journal vouchers may be an indicator of underlying problems. For auditors, these vouchers are a red flag. Now, if you put on your tax returns that magically $100,000 just showed up in your lap and you don't know where it came from, but you have it now, well, the IRS is going to come down on your ass and they're going to be wondering what the hell you're doing. Because the first thing that they're thinking is, well, that's a lot of money to just show up out of nowhere. What are you doing? Are you laundering money? Are you doing something illegal? What are you doing? And they're going to probably destroy your whole life trying to figure out where that money came from. Now, this is Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, formerly. He is speaking at a press conference in 2001. And let's just see what he says about these accounting errors.
From tail to the tooth. We know the adversary, we know the threat, and with the same firmness of purpose that any effort against a determined adversary demands, we must get at it and stay at it. Some might ask, how in the world could the Secretary of Defense attack the Pentagon in front of its people? To them I reply, I have no desire to attack the Pentagon. I want to liberate it. We need to save it from itself. The men and women of this...
It's kind of interesting wording.
Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it's stored on dozens of different technological systems that are inaccessible.
Now, this is interesting because $2.3 trillion is a lot of money. It's a very big number. This sort of issue stopped being a problem pretty quickly, but the inability of the Defense Department to properly track the funds that they were spending has continued, probably still continues to this day, although we don't get reports anymore. But more on that in a minute. Rumsfeld goes on to say that, you know, the reason you can't track all of this money is because you got a bunch of different departments that are in, you know, they're different ledger systems that are used to keep track of budgets, and it's all siloed. So they don't talk to each other, and it's difficult to keep track of everything. But yes, $2.3 trillion is what they were dealing with in 2001. This was also a preliminary report that was not looking at all budgetary information. Now, we come to another interesting year, 2016. This is the budget report by the Office of the Inspector General for fiscal year 2015, so it goes into 2016. OIG compiles data that is calculated and actually audited by the Defense Finance and Accounting Services in Indianapolis. And so DFAS compiles various reports from within the DoD to try to, you know, give a public accounting of what's going on, where the money's going. For that year, they totaled $6.5 trillion in these undocumented adjustments that continue 15 years after Rumsfeld was begging for help from the American people. And so it does make you wonder, especially considering in 2015, the total budget was $565 billion for the entire Defense Department. So obviously, $6.5 trillion is many multiples of 565 billion. So, what do these numbers mean? We don't precisely know because, again, journal voucher adjustments are summary level additions. So we don't know what the actual monetary trail is like because we don't get access, despite asking for years and years. We don't get access to underlying information, and as you'll see, this all comes down to national security issues. So they can't tell us exactly what's going on because it would jeopardize national security. Now, this is a clip of DoD Comptroller David Norquist. He essentially is trying to justify the $6.5 trillion. If you go through this clip, you'll see that what he says is that the adjustments are the result of changing the values of various different properties that are held by the Defense Department, by the government. Now, we do have, while the vast majority of the reports are only summary level accounting numbers, there is one report that has a table in an appendix with a little bit of insight into what those numbers actually mean, and it does also give some insight into what was going through Norquist's head and why he thought this was an okay justification. Now, this is a snippet of that OIG report from 2016. And this is the appendix where it does have a listing of general assets. You can see these are the undocumented adjustments relating to property changes. So these are net increases or decreases. So these two numbers add up to $169 billion, which, if you consider it, is actually much lower than $6.5 trillion. It's a little difficult to see, but that doesn't actually explain why there are $6.5 trillion in unaccounted for transactions. Of course, this is all illegal. By the law, the government is supposed to be keeping very detailed receipts of where these billions of dollars are going to. So it doesn't really pass the smell test, in my opinion, in the researchers who I garnered this information from, in their opinion as well. So we come to the excuses of the state and how they don't really add up entirely. Now, the OIG report expressly states that DFAS Indianapolis personnel did not prioritize correcting the system deficiencies that caused errors that resulted in these large adjustments. So they did not prioritize following the law, interesting. And then Rumsfeld in 2001 again tries to explain the 2.3 trillion as it just being difficult for them to get all of these different budgetary tracking systems to talk to each other. And so it might be a valid excuse for a couple years, 5 even, but it's coming on 30 years at this point, and it's not good enough. Now, this is a compilation of reports, financial reports, audits done by the Inspector General Government Accountability Office and wherever else Catherine Anns, as we'll see, economics professor from Michigan State University, Dr. Mark Skidmore, and his team of grad students who were interested in the trillions of dollars missing because they thought it was, bullshit, just kind of a media, oh, that doesn't really mean much. But then they started looking into it, started finding more money. Again, 98 to 2016. This is a list of all the reports that you can go look at. Now, they added them all up, and they got $21 trillion in unaccounted for, unverified, undocumented adjustments. Again, Catherine and Skidmore, they scoured the websites of the OIG, the GAO, to find any accounting of missing money that they could. And just for DOD and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, they found this 21 trillion. And it's pretty interesting again, because in those years, the total authorized spending was 8.6 trillion and 781 billion respectively. Now, this is a lot of kind of fucking numbers, and am I even explaining this well? Am I documenting this enough for you to say, yeah, this kind of makes sense? Or is there something that's, missing? Like, oh, they're just adding it up multiple times. Again, that is part of their excuse, and it is somewhat plausible. But these are, this is $21 trillion. It's, everything would have to be counted 4 or 5 times to result in that number. And why would there not be accompanying data for where the money was coming from and where it was going? That's the issue here. This is the 2016 report from the OIG, completely redacted every single number. Obviously, they were having trouble since the 21 trillion was a big enough number to spark a little bit of media interest. 2017, 18, 19, we get some weirder stuff. We don't get any official reports from the government themselves. We get one Bloomberg article by Anthony Capaccio, who apparently has a contact at DOD who provided him with this information that says in each of these years, just the Pentagon had 30 trillion each year in unverified, not having adequate supporting documentation, these adjustments, which is even more vague than the other 21 trillion. At least that is sort of verified by the auditing entities as being untrackable, as being without supporting documentation. This is just words from some people. Okay, and this is why Catherine and Mark don't really address this extra 90 trillion, because it's the meaning of it is even less understood than the 21 trillion. Now, they would just rather focus on the adjustments that have actually been verified to be unverified. 2019 comes around, and the end of 2019, the Federal Accounting Standards and Advisory Board passed and adopted Standard 56. This accounting advisory board is essentially put in place to actually make the protocols for how to compute and compile financial information in what is considered to be the government's idea of what it means to actually follow the law. Because many times in these in legislation, it says what you have to do, but it doesn't expressly explain how to do it. So this entity was put in place to determine that to the best of their ability, hopefully. But Standard 56 is marks a major departure from the generally accepted protocols. It allows all federal agencies and departments to legally misstate and move funds to conceal expenditures if it is deemed necessary to protect national security. It essentially just wipes away the need to even have undocumented adjustments. You can just have a bunch of numbers and say, hey, this is where this money came from, this is where this money went, and leave it at that. You don't need any pesky verification or independent auditing. You can just say it, and then we'll just believe you, because that's what the American people do. That's what humans do. It's too much work to dig and dig and dig and find all of the verifying information that actually leads to a clear documented conclusion. This is on top of the classification laws that are already on the books. It's been that way for a while now, that the president and whoever he deems fit can just say to any private corporation, any contractor, anyone doing any kind of business could have national security implications were they to publicly document their financial statements. And again, this does have some, pretty basic security, some pretty basic logic to the security concerns, I would say. But even, as you'll see at the very bottom here, even former SEC enforcement chief says that, or suggests that the ability to conceal financial information in the name of national security could lead some companies to play fast and loose with this law. And this is where I make my point, that the government, again, whether you believe they're doing these things for our own good or not, the U.S. government's founding document, the document that we all outlined as their charter to exist, it says a couple things about what you need to do with the tax dollars that they take from the people. And it states, Article 1, money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. It was abundantly clear to the founders back then that it was critical to the maintenance of a representative democracy, of an actual republic, that are not serfs, that are not the property of a monarch. It was important for the powers that be to explain very fucking clearly what they were doing with our money, because it's a lot of money and that results in power. And if you just have a group of people that just are amassing a whole shitload of money and they don't have to tell you what they're doing with it, well, then they can kind of just do whatever they want, can't they? And these people, as you know, were very, very wary of rulers that just kind of wanted to do what they want. Because historically speaking, those kinds of people trample all over the dignity and the natural born rights of the common folk. And we didn't want to do that on this continent. So we had to shoot all of those people. It was a big, bloody mess, and we should do our best to avoid those kind of events in the future. This brings us to the concluding concepts section, where we sort of wrap up all of these ideas, and they fit pretty nicely under the umbrella of national security and the this paradigm of 21st century warfare. All of the financial secrecy and manipulation can be justified when you consider the implications of nuclear warfare. These extreme scenarios where we could, probably a small percentage chance that this actually happens, but it's a non-0% chance that our planet, our fucking civilization, will be annihilated in a nuclear war. And so no matter how small of a possibility that is, it's so extreme that you must treat it as an absolute inevitability, because you must be prepared for something like that. You have to take any and all actions to avoid such a war, including actions that would perhaps win that war if it is possible. So the idea that I'm kind of thinking of is really just the basic implication of what that means for our entire society, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to justify hiding and siphoning money from the tax base, taking it from places where it otherwise could do some good here and there. But, we need missile guidance systems. We need this next gen, nuclear submarine. We need all of these war tools because we have to make sure that our survival is prioritized. And that is the idea. The prioritization of societal resources. Okay, so this goes beyond money. I mean, consider what it means to have a strong military in this century. It's not really just about having the most people behind you. It's about having the most advanced technology, right? Whether it's for offensive purposes or defensive purposes, it all hinges around engineering and scientific knowledge. So whoever has the most sophisticated understanding of physical principles, they are likely going to be the one with the upper hand in a full scale war, or in a cold war, in the subcategories of war that happen long before anything goes hot. So, question for you: what do you think happens if an MIT grad student, PhD candidate, comes upon a breakthrough and discovers a new kind of material, or maybe some Caltech physicist deciphers a way of, making some kind of propulsion system that's super efficient or something. And it could have, very real applications for public use, but it could also have military applications. What happens with that technology? The answer is that it gets sequestered. It gets pulled into a classified research division, and those scientific principles and ideas are taken and used for weaponry, for defense systems, for whatever these people deem as a necessity for maintaining national security. The implication being that all of our resources have to first go towards maintaining this military superiority and defensive security before it goes to, building a flourishing country, civilization, etc. So this, in my view, even though strangely enough you can say, yes, we need a shadow government to control everything and determine where all of our money, all of our scientific knowledge, all of our resources go, because it'll keep us good and safe. I am of the view that this is actually just increasing the likelihood that this kind of destruction happens, because the principles of freedom and transparency and the protection of rights is paramount. And see, this is kind of the heart of the problem that we face. It's that we want safety more than we want to be free. We want to make sure that we all survive more than making sure that everyone's ability to live and express themselves fully, truly, freely, in a free way, more than that. And I mean, even in my mind, I'm like, well, I can see very easily why you would think, yeah, let's sacrifice some rights. Let's sacrifice our freedom and make sure we don't all get fucking incinerated. Like that's a negative thing to happen. And I would agree. However, I would also say that to focus on the negative and to orientate our entire livelihoods, our entire lives, our entire society around one negative possible outcome is just a recipe for tyranny and for further chaos and destruction, and that the only way to have true order, the only way to actually build a more advanced society, which has a higher probability of maintaining peace, is by allowing the scientific advancements and general knowledge to be proliferated, and for the in the short term, that risk of chaos and destruction and madness to go up. You have to let people do what they will. Now you can say, well, their will is stupid and based. Yeah. How are people going to learn that it's better to orientate your behavior towards the higher side of the will rather than cater to the lower parts? It's by making mistakes and learning from them, right? So maybe it's fucked up to say, but it might actually be true that, you know, if we're dumb enough to fucking, you know, destroy our civilization with nuclear weapons over some bullshit, we might fucking deserve it. Like, we might genuinely, and I'm not black pilled. I do have a lot of hope, and you know, I see good, you know, in so many places, but genuinely, we might not deserve to move on, to become a type 1 civilization. It might not be for us. But the only way that we're going to get there is by prioritizing freedom and the rights of the individual. It's the basis of actual order. And freedom is not safe. It's not safe because nothing's safe. It's fucking life. You're gonna die. You ain't getting out alive. So stop trying to make that your entire life's purpose, because you're literally missing the whole fucking point. You need to live properly. This is what I'm learning. I'm not like exactly preaching to you. This is the shit that I'm learning myself. And I'm just trying to share some of my lessons, some of the lessons that I'm getting from wherever the fuck. Maybe a good thing to think about is the idea of self-protection. Like, learn how to protect yourself, because right now we've got a populace that wants other people to protect them. You want to endow a certain group of people, call them the police, with the only rights to carry weapons, because they should be the ones that protect all of us, right? Because they're trained to do that. They're trained to protect me. I'm not trained to do that. And what you end up doing is you weaken yourself and simultaneously concentrate power in a small group of people. And you would think we would have learned our lesson, but we think that things are different now. Things are different from how they have been for 5,000 years. They just changed just when we got computers. It all changed when we made a flying machine. It's all human nature is different. This paradigm means because you're putting such a focus on survival in this extreme scenario, survival at all cost, you have to sacrifice a whole lot. And financial transparency is, on the short list to get sacrificed, you could say. But it doesn't just stop there. What else might they perceive, or what else might they need to control because they think it has some kind of advantage for maintaining this security? Again, the issue of what kind of science it's used for the military is huge, because how can you have a free and open scientific ecosystem if all of the craziest advancements have to go towards the military applications? And you can't just have it both ways. You can't take a propulsion system and stick it in some kind of a passenger airline. That's too much of a vulnerability. Anything close to the public sphere and entities, states, advanced enough, such as Russia and China, they will be able to gather that information and back engineer all of your technological advantages. So part of the warfare game is not only maintaining your technological and scientific superiority, but it's maintaining control of who knows what. It's control over information itself. You have to keep everything compartmentalized so that all of the right people know the right things. Okay, nobody knows the whole except for a few on the top, and everyone below that only knows enough to do whatever their job is. And again, you can consider this all as necessary for the greater good, right? These are all the good guys, and they have to take all of this money away and hide all of this scientific advancement for the good of our country, for the good of the human race. You can say that. You can also make an argument that this system, this entire paradigm, is maintained, maybe not expressly created for the sole purpose of private interest, but private interests got involved at some point, and they figured that this, military tension and fear around, oh my God, are we going to get into a nuclear war, is very lucrative. It's very good for business. So there are clear incentives to perpetuate such systems, such patterns, right? It's like if you're a fucking company who makes money off of making weapons, you like war. You like it. You like that death because it's good for you. Which is depressing and dark to even consider. But it's like pretty basic logic. So does that logic extend to mean, hey, if you're a defense contractor, it might be good to actually, bolster or fund or arm some dangerous people on the other side of the world, because then they flare up and they do crazy shit and they kill a bunch of people, and that gets a reaction out of your clients and your customers who have to buy more of your shit to deal with It's a fucking terrorist. What I've come to see is that the greatest human weakness comes from one of our best qualities. We are trusting. And because the vast majority of people are good in their hearts, in their minds, you think that people in power are also the same. Because why wouldn't they be? You've never met a complete psychopath that you know of, at least. So you want to see these people in a good light. That's the thing. If you're ever trying to figure out what is true, and you're having a hard time figuring it out, maybe ask yourself, which one do you want to be true? Which option, if it were true, would make you feel good? Because that's a good indicator that you're going to want to believe that. You're going to want that to be true because you're going to want that feeling. So it's an indicator to look the other way. To at least consider the opposite possibility. That maybe is a possibility that is so far from your mind that it seems crazy, impossible. It could never be like this. Right? They have to be good people. But why? From the rabbit hole of the internet, reading just lots of different information, some bullshit, some I don't even know if it's bullshit. It sounds interesting, but I don't know. Some very clearly real things from that whole mess of information. It's become pretty clear to me that the people that comprise the intelligence community, the political class, the private contractor class, they're made up of people who are not morally together. They're not connected to morality in the same way that you and I might be. And they're again, there's an entire history of shit that, unless you're spending your entire fucking life studying information, you ain't gonna see this stuff ever. Like, you guys got jobs, you got friends and wives, girlfriends. You got shit to do. You can't be spending your nights on the computer reading about weird shit that might not even be true. But if you want to understand objective reality, you have to intake a large spectrum of information, including the bullshit, including the crazy, including the mainstream, including the the alternative views that are coherently put together, and the people that you should be steel manning your arguments against, the people like Catherine Austin Fitts, like Skidmore, like John Titus, James Corbett, Derek Bros, these other people, these other real journalists, researchers, actual, academics and professionals who their personal path, their life circumstances, have led them in a very specific way where they hit a fork in the road. They saw some shit and they spiraled out of the mainstream and into crazy land where conspiracies are a little more legitimate and thinkable than someone who is just kind of walking down the road without a care in the world, not even thinking about any of this stuff. To that person, it's not something to even consider. Why would you? It's crazy. It doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me feel good to think those thoughts, so why should I? We have to take all of our most precious beliefs and put them through a fucking meat grinder. Not fun. Miserable experience. Life ruining, even. But most people live lives of quiet desperation. Like I said in the previous episode, most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's. Their beliefs, their desires they come from somewhere else. They don't originate inside. To actually get to that, you have to dismantle everything on the outside. And this is what subjecting beliefs to criticism is. So let's do a little more of that. And we'll see where that gets us. I think that this is over. This has taken me so long. It's just fucking thinking and thinking and thinking. I think that this is over. Hopefully I've explained some of this in a coherent way. Good luck. Good luck. Until next time.